This video is to give you a bit of an introduction to using SketchUp for schools to do a 3D part that you can get ready for print. So I'm going to start by pasting into my browser window this link here, edu.sketchup.com/app hashtag. And when I do that, it's going to take me to the SketchUp for Schools site and hopefully log me in, or I'll have to log into my account. So I've already created an account. And it's going to log me in from my account. You will need to go ahead and create an account if you haven't done so, and use either your Google School account or your Microsoft OneDrive account that you have through your school system. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start a new project. So I'm going to click Create New, and I would like it in English units. You can choose your units, but we're going to do feet and inches. So I'm going to go ahead and open that, and it starts me a new environment, and it gives this figure, who is actually a person called Temple Grandin. You should look her up, and she's pretty amazing. She's over here just for scale, so you can see the scale of the things that you draw next to a person, but we're going to draw some things that are tiny, so I'm going to go ahead and select her and delete her. The next thing that I would like to do is save my work so that I don't lose things. It knows what to choose as save, or knows what to save. So I'm actually going to name this model. We're going to call it example arm. And it's going to ask me where on my Google Drive I want to save it. So I'm going to stick it in the SketchUp folder, and we'll put it in the tutorial, because that's what this is. Those are folders that I've already created that unfortunately will not let you create folders on your Google Drive, so you'll need to go into your Google Drive or your Microsoft OneDrive and create folders that you would like to house your SketchUp projects in, and then you can come back into SketchUp and save them. So now I have my arm saved. It tells me that right up there, and I'm ready to start drawing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I've already deleted my figure, so I'm now going to go over here, and I would like to set the properties for my drawing and how it's going to measure things. Rather than in fractions of inches, I'd like it to be in decimals of inches, and we're good with about 1/1000th of an inch precision. That should be just fine for our practices. So that's what I'm going to select. This is the model info button, and so that's kind of gives you information about your model. And now we're ready to go ahead and draw. So what I would like to do, I'm going to start by drawing a 2D rectangle. So I'm going to go over here on my left side of the screen and choose the rectangle tool, and it's already selected, but it brings up this pop-out menu, and you can select from all kinds of different shapes. We're gonna use the rectangle and the polygon tool for this tutorial. So start with a rectangle, and I want to start my rectangle at the origin. And so I'll click once to place the first corner at the origin, and so we're going to draw our shape on this flat axis right here, and we're going to give it some length and some depth. And before you click again, you're going to start typing the length that you would like it. So we're going to make this 16 inches by 0.75 inches deep. So 16 inches long by 0.75 inches deep, and you can see down in the right hand corner, that's where the dimensions got typed out. So now that I've typed that in, I hit return, and it has just drawn that to those specifications. So this is where it really helps for you to have a mouse with a scroll bar in the middle for moving around in this environment. I'm actually going to click on this button right here, which tells me how I can move. I can either rotate, pan, zoom. I can zoom to a selection, or I can zoom extents. I'm going to do zoom extents, which is actually a little close in. So I'll use my roller bar to zoom out again, and now I'm in where I can see, and now I can use this rotate to take a look a little bit more at the top of what I've just drawn. So there's my rectangle, and now I'm going to give this part some height, and to do so we use the push-pull tool, which is over here. I'm going to do push-pull, and I'm going to hover over this rectangle that I've just drawn and click on it, and I can pull up or I can push down, depending on how I want to draw my part. I want to pull up, and before I click again, I could just click and it'll give whatever distance that I've pulled it, but I want the exact distance, and so I'm going to type a distance of 1.5 inches and hit enter, and now it is drawn it to that correct height. So now I have this nice big block, and I'd like to draw some things on the block in order to be able to cut shapes into the block. So if I want to cut away, I can just go ahead and draw them anywhere and cut, but I want to make sure that I've placed things very precisely so that we have everything in the right measurements. So to do that, we have to create some measurement lines, some construction lines. So we'll use this tape measure tool, and I'm actually going to rotate things a little bit and zoom out, and actually I want to pan, move over so I can see what's going on with my part. So go back in to our tape measure, and oops, I accidentally clicked. Just hit escape if you accidentally click something, and it'll take you back and undo what you just did, unless you've drawn something. So what I want to do is be able to go from, I want to create a construction line that's 1/2 inch away from this left side. So I'm going to click on the midpoint. If I hover over, you can see if I'm hovering over the edge, it tells me it's on the edge, but the square or the cursor is a red square, and as soon as I get near the midpoint, it'll snap to it, and the cursor turns this sort of bluish circle or cyan circle. So if I click once there and I start to move my mouse over, I can again type in the exact measurement. So I'm going to do 0.5 inches and hit enter, and it creates the line at 1/2 inch right there. So I'm going to create another line so that I can have an intersection, because I want to draw a rectangle with its first point at a specific location. So I'm going to determine the guide point where I want that first corner to start. So to do a guide point, I'm going to go again, and I'm going to on this edge, the lower edge, and when I get to the intersection between the construction line and the edge, my cursor changes again. I click once and start to draw up along the line, and again I want this 1/2 inch from the bottom, so I'll type in 0.5 and hit enter, and now I've created a guide point. So you can see the little point right there, and when I hover over it, it tells me it's a guide point. So these lines are just for construction only. They won't get printed in a 3D part, so they're kind of nice. So now I can go ahead and place another rectangle, which is what I want to draw now, exactly at that guide point. So I'll start by drawing, clicking my rectangle tool, and I can hover over and it'll snap to that guide point. So I click once and I draw my rectangle up and over, and it's sort of disappearing on me a little bit, but there you can see that I have this rectangle on the face, and to give it exact dimensions, I type in its length first. So I'm going to make it 5 inches long, so 5 by 0.5 high, and hit enter, and now it's drawn this rectangle. So now I'd like to draw another shape. I'm going to draw a hexagonal shape, And this is going to be, for when we do our trebuchet, this is going to be the bearing for a trebuchet. So what I want to do is draw another exact placement. So I'll use my tape measure again and click on that. And I'll again hover over the midpoint, and I can hover over that and kind of drag. And when you hover over, you can see that we have a red line once I'm on that midline, and it kind of remembers that. And if I wanted to, I could come up here and find the midpoint along this edge, and there's that midpoint. And now it's remembered where the midpoint was of that other, of both of the lines. So if I clicked right there, it would place this hexagon that I'm about to draw in the exact center of the side of this long brick that I've created. But I actually want to place it in a different spot. I'm going to take it and click. I'm going to click this and drag out here, and I'm going to place it about 7. I'm going to place it 7 inches away from that edge, and hit enter. And there we are. There's that line. And again, I want to place a guide point, and my guide point, I want it to be equidistant from the top and the bottom. I want to be exactly in the middle of this construction line on my beam, or on my block here. So I'll click once on the intersection between the construction line, and once I get to that midpoint, it remembers where the midpoint was. It shows me that dotted line and connects it to the midpoint, and my cursor changes color. Actually, it doesn't. It just shows me the midpoint. So I can click there, and now I have a guide point at the midpoint. So now I'm going to draw a hexagon, and I go over to this drawing tool, shape tool really, and I'm going to choose hexagon. So once I click that, I click once to place the center of the hexagon, and I start to drag away from the center point there. And as I do so, you can see that it wants to, what the measurement that it's giving me is to radius of a circle that is that the polygon is inscribed in the circle. So that means that the circle goes around the outside of the polygon. I actually want to change that because the measurement that I want to have is to the edge, from the center to the flat point of this hexagon. And I can do that by pressing either the Option button if you're using a Mac, or the Control button if you're using Windows machine. And if I change that, now I have a circumscribed polygon. That means that the polygon is around the circle, and the circle's on the inside of the polygon. And so that's just a different way of dimensioning this polygon. And I'm actually going to rotate this around because I would like the flat surface to be on the top of my beam, just to give me some extra space between the edge of the beam and the point of this hexagon. So I want this to be a measurement of 1/2 inch, which it actually is, but just so that I have it exact, I'm going to type in 0.5 and hit enter, and now I have a hexagon. So I'll go ahead and hit my select, so I'm not drawing any more points. And now what I want to do is I would like to cut holes where these shapes are that go all the way through my part. So to do that, I use the push-pull tool and click on that. And now as I hover over different parts, I can choose where different surfaces that I would like to push and pull. So I'm going to hover over first this rectangle that I've drawn, and I can either pull it out this way and it will create more volume of a part, or, so I clicked once to start pulling it, and now I'm going to push it back this way, and I can either kind of look, it's kind of hard to see where the end of that is, but if I hover over that back edge, it'll tell me it's on edge, and when I click that a second time, then it draws a hole all the way through. And if I pan around, you can see through the part that helps you know that you've drawn all the way through and not extended that shape out the other side. So I can do the same thing with this hexagon that I've drawn, I can either pull it this way or I can push it all the way that way, and I don't want to do that. I want to go on to the edge and click there, and then it goes and cuts the hole through my part. So now I have a part with a couple of holes in it, and I'm ready. I might be ready to make this into a real 3D part by sending it to a 3D printer. So to do that, we have to do a couple of steps. First, we have to select the entire part. So if we click the select tool, and now we can draw a box that covers the whole part. So just click and drag until that select encircles your entire part, and you'll know that all the things that are selected have blue edges and blue shaded surfaces. That'll tell you what part of your part is selected. If your whole part isn't blue, outlined and shaded, then you're missing some of it. You need to select the whole thing. So go into, over here on the right hand side, your entity info. We're going to click on that. Actually, before we do that, we can take a look and see, oh look, it's 60 entities that I've drawn, but I want to have this be a whole group. So if I right click after I've selected on my part, I'm going to say make group, and now it has turned that into a solid group. So I can also go and check that it's done that correctly over here, and now it tells me in my entity that it is a solid group. That's what I want to have in order to be able to do 3D printing. It has to be a solid group. If I've done something, and I'm going to hit undo here, if I've done something like I've drawn a line that's off in space somewhere over here, I just got this line, and then I go ahead and select the whole thing again and say make group, and then I go over here to my entity info. It just says it's a group. And that's a problem. That means it's not a solid, it's not ready to 3D print. And if I want to, I can go down here into my model inspector, or solid inspector, and if I click on that, it says, oh, I've got a stray edge, and here it will help me fix this error. So if I click fix error, then it's deleted that stray edge, and now, good news, we have a solid model. If I scroll up here, it should be, there we go. Click on that again for it to refresh. Now it tells me it's a solid group, and I'm good to go. So here also is where you can see how much volume you have. That'll be important for your 3D printing. This is a large volume. We've got almost 15 and a half cubic inches of material that we'd use up if we were to 3D print this part as it's drawn now. You may not want it to be that volume, so if you wanted less volume, you'd need to cut that down and decrease the volume. But if it looks good and you're ready to print the part, you can come up here and say, with the little file folder, we're going to export and export STL. And what this will do is download an STL file, which can then be sent to a 3D printer and printed. And this is what you would submit. So it should download that, and then you should choose where you would save that on your local computer. One more thing to mention is that once you've created a solid part by grouping this, you can no longer make cuts into this part. So if you want to still make modifications, push it and pull it, or make cuts into it, or draw things, you can still draw things on it, you just can't cut into it. You need to undo that group command that we did. So all the way undo, so I undo that, and now I can see that it's a, if I go ahead and select all of this stuff, it's back to just entities, which is what I want to be able to continue to continue to draw and make modifications to this. So we can't make modifications once it's a solid group. End of this tutorial. There's lots more that you can do in SketchUp to shape this in a different shape, but this gives you just sort of an introduction to how you draw a 3D part.